Hello Year 10, Mr. Godman here, and today we're going to finish our work on what did the Nazis want from German women. We're going to look at the success and failure of Nazi policy towards women. So last lesson we looked at some of the policies which the Nazis introduced to try and shape the role of women. Your do now is all about that. I've given you some of the policies and you need to match them up with the correct definitions. So you need to pause the video and have a go at this, and then when you're done, hit play. And here are the answers. You need to score yourself and write down any that you got wrong in a different colour pen. When you're done, hit play and we'll move forward. So we're coming to the end of inquiry 1 today. And we only have one part left to do on that, and that is the results of Nazi policy towards women. Now last lesson you already read information 1.7 and you did a short task with it. Firstly, you decided for each of these methods, were they carrots or sticks? After that, we completed our input-output diagrams, showing which policies the Nazis used to achieve their aims for women. Now, if you didn't finish that task, then your first job today is to pause the video and get that one completed. When you're done, then you can hit play again. Now we're going to start to think about whether the Nazis succeeded in achieving their aims. As you can see, I've put the 4 aims which the Nazis had for women back up on the slide. Now you're going to read a short collection of sources, and we're going to practice interpreting sources. For each source, you're going to decide, does it show success or does it show failure of Nazi policy towards women? And you're going to explain your decision. Now, some of the sources might show both success and failure, and that's fine, but you need to explain your choice. So here's source 3, a letter from several women to a Leipzig newspaper in 1934. Take a moment to read the source for yourself. And now I'm going to model the answer for you. Having read this source, I think it shows that Nazi policies were a failure. Why? Because the women who wrote this letter rejected Nazi policies. You can tell how unhappy they are with them. It seems that they did not like the way that girls' opportunities in life and their status were being reduced. Your job now is to look at the other sources, and just like me, you're going to decide success or failure, or both, and you're going to say why. You're going to need to pause the video to do that, and when you're done, hit play and we'll move on. Okay, now let's step back from the sources for a moment and think about the results of Nazi policies as a whole. First of all, I'm going to teach you a little bit here. So let's think about, did the Nazis achieve their 4 big aims? For a long time, historians believed that the Nazi state was highly organised and efficient, but nowadays many historians challenge that. Nowadays, many historians believe that the Nazi state was actually quite chaotic, and that the Nazis were constantly moving from one crisis to the next, and every time they met a crisis, they developed new policies to try and deal with it. Now that really matters in the case of women. You see, in 1937, the Nazis had to change their policy towards women. Why? Well, in 1937, Hitler began to rearm Germany. Now we already know that part of his plan for national recovery was to rebuild the German armed forces and to break the Treaty of Versailles. So, from 1937 onwards, Hitler began to invest in rearmament. For example, building aircraft for Germany, where we know that an air force was strictly forbidden by the Treaty of Versailles. Another way that Hitler rearmed Germany was to begin conscription. This means forcing all young men to serve in the army. That increased the size of Germany's army. However, these young men had to leave their jobs in the factories, and when they left them, there were gaps. This is why policy towards women changed, because there were now shortages of labour in factories and on farms. The Nazis needed women to fill these gaps, so women were now encouraged into the workplace. So as you can see, Nazi policy towards women had changed significantly. Having spent the first few years of Nazi rule telling children that they should concentrate on the home, they now had changed their mind and were encouraging women to work as well. And now it's time for you to do a reading task. So I want you to read information 1.10 in your workbook. Here you're going to read about the results of Nazi policies towards women. Here's what you need to do while you're reading. I want you to underline success or failure in 2 different colours, and you need to do this from the Nazi perspective. And then, when you've done that, I want you to number the 2 results which you think the Nazis would be most satisfied with, and the 2 they would be most unhappy about. This will probably take you about 5 minutes, so you need to pause the video now, and when you're done, hit play. And now we're coming to your final task. You're going to use everything that you've learned over the last 2 lessons to answer this question. How effective were Nazi policies towards women? Now, you're probably only going to write 1 paragraph here, but I want a balanced answer, some supporting detail, this means evidence and examples, and I want you to reach a judgment at the end. So here's one way that you could answer it. Start by putting forward one side. You could explain some of the ways in which Nazi policies towards women were effective, and you're going to need to include some evidence. What policies did they introduce, and what evidence do we have that those policies were a success? You could use my sentence starters if you like. Then, I want you to flip to the other side. You're going to explain some of the ways in which Nazi policies were less successful. Were there any aims which they really didn't meet? And again, you need to supply your evidence. And then, at the end of your paragraph, I'd like you to take a judgment. On balance, do you think the Nazis were very effective, partly effective, moderately effective? You need to decide, and you're going to give your winning points. And when you've done that, your homework is done. I look forward to teaching you next lesson.